I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I'm the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you might be listening, whenever it is that you might be listening in. I am just grateful to count you, even if for this one episode, as one of my listeners to this show. So welcome. I want to thank you for partnering with me in my attempt, what I always call my attempt to run to dark with the light that I have found in my running journey and in the stories of some friends that I have been fortunate enough to meet along the way of this running journey. And today I have a special story to share, a special friend that I have met. I don't even know if he's a runner. We never even got around to talking about that, but he is certainly a part of this running journey that I am on. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how I came to meet Father Jim and set up this conversation I'm going to have with him today and let you all listen into. I was out on a run last week, and my friend Lachelle had, long ago, we talked about in my podcast with her this white space that comes about when I'm out running. It's sort of this quiet space that I have found I can't find it any other place. And that space for me is often filled with conversations with God. And I have said many times that running has helped me improve my communication with God, improve the quality of my conversations with Him. I've always been great, I think, at talking to God, but I've just never been a good listener. And so running gives me the peace, I think, the quiet. It just opens up spaces where I hear Him more clearly than I ever have. And maybe it just gives me a chance to listen deeper. God tells us, be still and listen. And although I'm constantly on the move and running, there's a stillness to it that I don't get in other areas of my life, right? Whether it's at work, whether you're doing things with your kids, whether we're just sitting around on our electronic devices, we fill ourselves with noises that, although many times those noises may be healthy and good, they do not create this quiet space where we have the best opportunity to hear God. And that's what running does for me. So I was out running last week, and in this quiet space, I started thinking about running the upcoming Hokie Half Marathon. I'd been debating it. Some friends had thrown it out there, suggesting this might be a good race to fill this search I'd had for a September race. And so while I was out there running, I was thinking about this Hokie Half Marathon. And at the same time, I had these images coming into my head that had been playing out on TV of the tragedy connected to Hurricane Harvey down in Texas. And in that moment, through, again, I believe, just listening to God, Him pointing me in a direction, I made the decision that I was going to run this Hokie Half Marathon, and I was going to do it somehow supporting these folks struggling down in Texas. I came back, I sat down on my computer, went ahead and registered for this race, and then I started wondering and sort of researching, how is it that I can help? How can I use this race to help the folks down in Texas? What's a possible platform I could do that? I really didn't have much idea. I started then with, I sent a message out on my own social media to friends asking if anybody had any personal stories connected to the tragedy down there in Texas. Because if I was going to help, I wanted to do it in a personal way, if I could. There were tons of platforms out there where you could click or text or just send a donation. And that's all well and good. I'm not saying that's not a good idea. But for me, I think knowing the story that you're supporting, being involved in the story you're supporting, helps you better understand the role that God is playing in that story, the role that God is playing in your life into that story. And that's really important to me. And I thought the best way to get that was to hear some personal stories. I didn't have any that I knew of offhand of friends or family struggling in Texas. So I just reached out to other people and hoping that they could provide me something. Several folks were kind enough to reach out and point me in different directions. And I ultimately ended up in a conversation with a dear old friend of mine. I worked with my friend Janice in North Carolina. We worked together with at-risk kids at Eckerd Youth Alternatives for several years, and we've remained friends over the years. Janice put me in touch with her friend Tom, who is the Minister of Fun, and anybody who's got the title Minister of Fun is going to be a friend of mine. But Tom Lusk is the Minister of Fun at St. Andrew's Church in Pearland, Texas, part of the Houston Metropolitan. Pearland actually got 57 inches of rain from Hurricane Harvey. Just hard to imagine that amount of rain that's taller than both of my kids. So that's, again, just gives you a visual of the kind of water they were inundated with. Anyhow, I reached out to Tom, and then Tom put me in touch with Father Jim Liberatore, the pastor at the St. Andrew's Church there in Pearland. And then I ended up on the phone with him and one of the other church leaders, Debbie, and they started telling me a little bit about St. Andrew's Church, and immediately what I picked up on, and this became the story I was drawn into, is St. Andrew's is a church that is not just becoming part of the community in response to this hurricane need and this hurricane recovery efforts. St. Andrew's has been partners with the community for a very long time. So them reaching out to the community to offer a helping hand at this time is just part of what they do. It wasn't a planned reaction to a need. It was because they've been partnering with this community in a very loving way for a long time. It was just part of this relationship that they had, right? When we have people in our family that have a need, it's not, okay, sit down, we got to kind of map out how we do this. It just becomes a natural response of what you do. I knew after talking with Father Jim and Debbie that they were going to be the platform for me to run my half marathon for St. Andrew's Church and their work in the community. Here in a little bit, I'm going to let you listen to an interview, a podcast interview that I had with Father Jim as we talked a little bit about their role in the community. We talk a little bit about what they have seen and what they have been doing in this immediate aftermath and in a helping way as part of their church. And so that is the how, that's the who, and that's kind of the what I plan to do. But you know, when I came and I had that conversation and I decided this is what I wanted to do, you know, all of my work here on this podcast and my writing and some videos I do and just this 21047.com journey, I get a lot of support from my Patreon supporters. I refer to the Patreon platform often in these shows because really the time I have to do this 21047.com work and the opportunity I have to sign up for races like the Hokie Half is really supported by this Patreon platform. And at one level, my marathon level supporters, when they support me at that level, I commit that I'm going to run my races to partner with them on various causes that are close to them. So then I would use podcasts and my writing to support their causes and things that are close to their heart. So when I decided that I was going to use this Hokie Half to support Hurricane Harvey relief and partner with St. Andrew's Church, I knew I needed to first reach out with my 4 marathon level Patreon supporters to make sure that they were okay with me using this race to support this cause that was really close to me and I really felt like God had put on my heart. So I reached out to the 4 of them, Robin Larkin, Tiffany Eisentrout, Nicole Williams, and Rachel Wood. I ran this idea by them and every one of them said, Keith, I love it, go for it, and we'll also contribute to this cause. And, you know, that was way more than I anticipated hearing. I just wanted them to give me the go-ahead, but to hear such a passionate and an enthusiastic backing of this, and then on top of that, a commitment to financially support it when they're already supporting me through Patreon, that was a bit overwhelming. But I knew that was God saying, Keith, I told you, right? You don't need to check out and do some research to see if I'm really telling you I want you to do this. This is something I am calling you to do. And so with their blessing, I move full speed ahead on it. And I really need to also point out the rest of my Patreon supporters who, like I said, without them, I wouldn't have the means to enter these races. I wouldn't have the time to sit down and write and record podcasts and interviews. So I'm also very grateful for Christy Allen, Lachelle Head, Solomon Whitfield, Kelly Anderson, Kimberly Yenzer, Kimberly Caldwell, Missy Blacker-Hepp, Jenny Reynolds, Shannon Salah, Donna Schultz-Shigana, and Angela Marini. And this whole Patreon supporters team of mine has made this initiative possible and so much of what I do possible. So it's all set, right? I'm going to run the Hokie Half Marathon, my 9th half marathon, coming up on September 17th, next Sunday. I will be running it for the hurricane relief efforts that will be happening through the St. Andrew's Church there in Pearland, Texas. I'm going to be making a financial donation to them, courtesy of and helped out by my Patreon supporters. And then I'm also asking anybody else who's listening in, who is drawn into this story, and I hope you'll listen to Father Jim. It's kind of hard not to be drawn into what they're doing after you hear him. If you want to help me, if you want to support, I'm asking everybody. I'm running 13.1 miles as part of this half marathon next weekend. So maybe you could find it in your heart to donate $13 to the cause. There'll be a link attached to this podcast. I'll be sharing links on social media where you can go do that. I would appreciate it. And if not, if that's $13 isn't something you can do, then certainly less is, every dollar is going to count. These folks really do have need. Certainly more is absolutely welcome. And if you can't give anything, just pray for these folks. Pray for the efforts that are going to be happening through St. Andrew's Church. Pray for the leadership. Pray for the congregation. Pray for the folks who've been affected. Prayer is absolutely another great resource, and likely the biggest resource that will help move this efforts forward in a very loving and helpful way. So with all of that said, I want to turn this over and let you hear a little more from Pastor Jim Liberatore in St. Andrew's Church there in Pearland, Texas. Listen to our conversation. Thank you again for listening in today, and I hope your hearts are drawn in by the words from this pastor and the words that reflect his love for this community. So take it away, Father Jim. Well, I want to welcome Father Jim Liberatore to the 21047.com podcast. And so welcome, Father Jim.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and so just a little bit of the story. I was out running last week, and I've shared on this show a lot of times when I'm out running, I just have the best conversations I think I've ever had in my life with God. And I was out running and had the images of this Hurricane Harvey and Texas and just the damage that I was seeing on TV, and that just started weighing on my heart. And so I came back after that run and started just trying to figure out what I could do in some small way. And I reached out on Facebook just to some friends. Does anybody know anything, have any personal stories going on down in Texas that I might be able to support in some small way? And long story short, through some connections, my friend Janice Weed knew a mutual friend of Father Jim, Tom Lusk. And so I got on the phone last week with Father Jim here, and boy, I just fell in love with St. Andrew's Church there, and I'm really looking forward to partnering with them to help from Virginia here any way that we can. You know, so Father Jim, when I talked with you last week, you talked to me about sort of this long-standing partnership you've had with your community. You're sort of recognized down there as a church that really likes to be involved in a helping way in your community. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I've been here 22 years at St. Andrews, and many churches kind of establish themselves looking inward and taking care of the family, but don't necessarily look outward. And my understanding of reading Scripture and from some people like John Wesley, see that really we have a mission to the community, and that I basically encourage the congregation over those years to see the walls collapse of the church, and that the parish or the church walls actually become the community. And so that we are the pastors of the community. We are the lovers of community. And it took a while for people to change their mind and change their hearts. And we started with something called Churches Left the Building, where we just canceled church for a Sunday and we just wouldn't be here. And I'd say, we've got a whole bunch of places for you to go serve. The first go around, people just went out and did something, because I feel like it takes time for people to change their hearts. So it wasn't super challenging. And then over the years, we made them say, okay, now you can't do a job where you don't meet people. And so they started meeting people. And then finally, we've gotten to a point where we say we would like you to come back with a story and a name. Just one is fine. The story may not be real interesting, but you actually get to know people in the community. And over the years, people started coming up with their own stuff and their own ideas. They would come and tell me what they did. And so really it's been a transformation of a pretty typical church that says, we do church stuff. We gather as a company and we do church stuff together, and that's kind of what God wants us to do. And I saw a vision that we need to be in the community, and that really we'll take care of ourselves, but most of our energy is the 167 other hours of the week when we are out in the community. So we actually have a sign when you leave the parking lot. It says you're now entering the mission field. And so for us, this was really a transformation. So we began to make neighbors and friends and got to know people, because after the first time you go, people are a little skeptical. What are you going to do? Do you have an agenda? Do you care more about bagging me as a Christian than you care about me? And we had to go out and say, no, we really care about you. We want to know your story. We want to know you, and we will be back. We are here for the long haul. This isn't about numbers. And so, for instance, we started a relationship with Lawn Elementary School. This is a completely secular place. Lawn is a Title I elementary school, which means most of the children are on free and reduced lunch. They're in below the poverty level. And we said, we would love to just partner with you. We have no idea what this means, and neither do you. You'll just have to trust us, and we'll work at your pace. And so we started just doing sort of odd jobs they needed done, and then finally told the principal, I said, if you're comfortable, we're comfortable saying no if you're comfortable asking, because we just might say yes. And we have built things for them and fixed up things for them. We send backpacks of food home with the kids. We do a Easter egg hunt out there off hours. We bring our pumpkin patch. We're known for doing things around a pumpkin patch out front. And we bring that to the kids. And they come and they unload pumpkins with us. They participate over here. And so there's a real fluid relationship. And when Harvey hit, one of the first people I called was the principal and said, are you okay? And is your Lawn family okay? And she suggested I call the counselor. So I called Amy, the counselor, and I said, are you okay? And is the community okay? And it turns out the community wasn't okay. Some of it were teachers, some of it were students and their parents. And so that's how we started going out, mucking out houses for some of them. And in fact, we'll probably be going this weekend up in that area. So that's kind of the story about how we got here and then specifically what it looks like. But we've developed a lot of relationships.
I can't tell you how much I love that imagery of knocking the walls down and the community becomes the walls of our church. And when you described that last week when you and I talked, I knew God had led me to this conversation with you, this partnership with you, because of that whole idea of, I love sending people out and gathering stories, because that was what was important to me. If I didn't want to just send out a generic donation, as much as that might help, I think we draw closer to God when we know a little more powerfully the stories that we're getting involved in. I think we can see his work through us and others if we can try to be as intimate as possible with that story. And that's, a lot of what this conversation you and I are having right now is part of that process. But hearing you and talk with Debbie, just clearly the heart you've developed for your people over the years, these stories that you've collected and stories that have become strong enough that you are now calling to check on people in hard times. I don't know, to me, that's always been sort of my vision of the church. And I think in a lot of ways and places, sometimes we get that wrong. So I'm just happy to be part of a place and a story that I really feel like is getting that all right. And so talk to me then. You all have been out there. You're in Pearland, Texas. Talk to me about what it is you all have seen as you've been out there helping folks out. Here we are in Virginia, and clearly we see the scenes on TV, but you all are in there. Literally, I've seen pictures of you all in the homes. I'm just wondering, for those of us who aren't there, what are we missing in terms of that story when we just see the pictures on TV?
Sure. And I just want to add one thing to what you just said, is that as Christians, we should be being shaped by a story, a bigger story. And so that's why I think story is so important. We've gone out in basically Pearland has 5 school districts and it's in 3 counties. So it is for its size, it is the most diverse community in the United States. There are 72, I believe, languages spoken in the homes in Pearland. And so there's all kinds of folks here. And we've gone out and because we're closer to the Gulf, when it rains up north, it has to pass through us to get to the Gulf of Mexico. And so when it rains a lot, not only do we have our rain, but we have the rain that's coming down to us. And we have Clear Creek is one of the bigger places we have going through us. The Brazos River is nearby as well. So some of the communities were fine. Pearland was isolated. You couldn't get in or out of it, at least surrounding Pearland. There was no way in or out for a while. But there's some real devastation, even in my subdivision, which is only a mile from the church. We border on Clear Creek, and the water came up within about 5 feet of my door. But on the east end of my subdivision, they all went under water. And this morning, if you drove by on that street, basically their entire life is on the curb, including about 2 or 3 feet of sheetrock from all over the house that they took out so they could dry the house out. But then you could go to the west end of the subdivision and people just have their trash out just like a regular day. So you'll drive one place and it looks great, and you'll drive another place and it's miserable. But talking to the folks, you get 2 things. For the people that are great, they feel a lot of guilt. And so part of what we do is go out and say, you're not guilty of anything. You're fortunate, and maybe in thanks you might want to help, but you're not guilty of anything. Because a lot of times, especially in hurricanes, there's what we call survivor's guilt. Now, as far as going out of the houses, some of the places we go, we've never met these people. In some cases, one case we sent a group to a Spanish family, and the group we sent, we didn't necessarily know. And the group we sent didn't speak Spanish, but we still could communicate. And really what you do is when you go is you find out, number one, people are appreciative. Number two, people want to tell you kind of what's important. And so they just want to talk. And so often what I've told people, when you go, you might be the person who doesn't rip out flooring and who doesn't take things to the curb. You may be the person that just talks to that person because they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. Many people don't have insurance. Even if you do have insurance, even if FEMA is going to help out, you're far from whole. You're going to be investing a lot of money to get your home back. And then you realize you're going to be displaced or it's inconvenience. The kids are out of school and it's all disruptive. And many people who have children are really concerned about their kids because their kids are having nightmares. Their kids are wondering if the one blanket they've got underneath their arm, somebody's going to come and take it. It's very disruptive. And you can't promise that things are going to go back to normal. They'll go to a new normal, and we're not even sure what that is. And it can't be quick. You know, even if we go and gut a home, and somebody finds a contractor and fixes it all up and it's all turned around in a month, it's not the same.
Right.
And it probably isn't going to be a month. We're probably looking at, and I'm not a city official, but we're probably looking at 5-10 years before everybody's whole. Hurricane Ike, I think, was about 7 years ago. I could be wrong. I lost a roof. My daughter lost a roof. She lost probably half her house because the rain came in. And they just patched the last roof in Pearland. When I talked to somebody in the Parks and Rec, they just patched the last roof just a couple months ago. And so, you know, and if you're poor, you don't know you just don't know where to turn and what to do because it's all on you. And then some people, I talked to the lady at the donut shop. Everywhere I go, no matter where I go, I ask, how did you do? You know, I ask everybody that. Well, I was at the donut shop getting some donuts for my grandchildren the other day because they're out of school and we had to go pick them up because their mom has to get her job back and go to work. So I went to the donut shop and I said, how'd you do? And she said, well, the donut shop took in water and stuff, but they're okay. But she lost her car. Her car got stuck in water at a major intersection, and then the water just went up over the roof of her car. And so she lost her transportation. They say 500,000 cars have been lost in the Metro Houston area, 500,000 cars. And for many people, you know, they're one missed day from work of losing their job, or they're one day's pay from not being able to make the month work. And again, there's many people with plenty of money in Pearland and everything is fine. And we're finding they're just incredibly generous. And certainly the people of St. Andrews have stepped forward. And like yourself, we've had people from other places in the country come, you know, mainly through friends we've made over the years or people who are friends of our friends of our friends, kind of like you, who have said, you know, these are good people. This will work if you work through St. Andrews. And that's how we got two women who basically helped rebuild New Orleans after Katrina and spent over a decade doing that. And they came by this week and sat down with me and with Debbie and said, all right, how can we help you make this happen? How can we help you do something? What do you need? So I think from my congregation, there's just a lot of dis-ease because, you get into a habit. You kind of think this is how the world's going to work. Now, if I wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, I realize I don't look like I did when I was 20. So you kind of know things change. Kids move out, people die, you get new jobs, you buy new houses, cars break down. So you kind of know that things change. But somewhere in our heart, we also realize, could you just stay the same just because change is so hard? And so a part of it is everybody's got thrown into change at once. Often if you're in a congregation, one person gets thrown into change and the congregation surrounds them. But now we're all thrown into change one way or the other. And so it's much harder to surround one another. Because a lot of times somebody who was actually helping mucking out a house had mucked out their house 2 days earlier. There's just so much change. We don't even know yet, I think, how we feel. We're still sort of numb. We're in the heroic phase where we're kind of excited about, hey, let's get out there, let's do stuff. But anybody who studies catastrophes, disasters like this knows we're going to go in kind of a bummer phase where, wow, it's not fast enough. It's not soon enough. It isn't going to go back to where we were before. I can't reclaim the life I had. If nothing else, my kid has nightmares and knows it's possible to lose everything. In July of this year, my daughter didn't know that it was possible to lose everything. I can't protect her from that. So there's a lot of loving and behind the scenes listening that happens that's even beyond mucking out a home. And our hope is to help recover Pearland, but do it in body, mind, spirit, emotion, housing, everything. Not just simply a house, because that's not going to be enough. We've been traumatized, even if our houses were made whole.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here listening to you, and it's overwhelming on so many levels. I mean, from the numbers standpoint, when you talk 500,000 lost vehicles, and then you start projecting out what that means to stories of people who can't make it to work, who can't get their kids to activities, and then you start considering all of this collective trauma in these young kids, and you start projecting out what that means over the years in their lives. I'm just curious from a pastoral standpoint as leading your church, how on earth do you even begin to sort of, and obviously you all have the love piece down pat. It's just part of who you are. But from a managing standpoint of that, where do you even begin to try to figure out how do we do this? Because one of the things you said to me last week that has stuck with me, and again, one of the reasons I'm so attracted to St. Andrews, as you said, and I'm not sure it's a direct quote, but you said, Keith, here in a few days, few weeks, the news will be gone, but this story will be going on for a long time. And you clearly have your fingers on the pulse of how tragic that story is now and how much hardship's going to be associated with it for years to come. So I'm just curious, you personally, how do you even begin? You may not even know the answer to this in the moment, but how do you even begin to start to try to manage that healing process?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure we can manage it so much as in our case, ask God to guide us through it. One of the things I did is, as soon as humanly possible, which was Wednesday after the water stopped, so it was like 2 days, I said, anybody that can get to the church, let's get to the church and let's just talk to each other. Let's worship. And let's see where we go from there. And so part of what I did is I kind of said, this is what it's going to look like for the next couple of years. And so for some people, this was new. I said, I've got some activities for kids to kind of work, but we need, number one, your leader, which is me and it's Debbie and a few others, we need to stay healthy. And then you need to be because we're not going to be any good to Pearland if we're not. And then this is partly our style. Our style is to have a little bit of information, move in, and learn as we do, which means sometimes we do stuff that's just stupid. It doesn't work. But we have found, at least from our perspective, and I know there's a lot of ways to do it, is that timidity, fear, keeps you from working, I think, the wonder that God has. John says that perfect love casts out fear. Well, I kind of say perfect fear casts out love. And fear, it's really hard to be faithful when you're fearful. So really we started in, hey, tell your story. If you're mad at God, be mad at God. I mean, the Psalms are filled with people that are mad at God. But I said, get connected. And here's what my encouragement was. I said, get connected to the bigger God story. God's story is much bigger than a day. He created everything in the book of Genesis, said it was good. He loved it, said, I'll provide you a way out in both the Old Testament Exodus and Jesus' Exodus. And he said, I'll get you through it. And then in the book of Revelation, he said, I win. And even though you can't see it over the horizon, I will. Stick with me. Yeah. So I said, plug yourself back into that bigger story. And then I said, plug yourself into your own story. And I told times of when my wife and I had 2 bouts of unemployment. I had bouts of depression. We had our moving van stolen once and lost everything we ever owned. We had our condominium burned down, and we wound up getting clothing from the Red Cross. I was making very good money and had a great career in the oil business, and decided that there was no more construction in the United States, which is what I like working in the field. And so we switched careers, which was a huge financial change, and it was a move. And I said, every one of those times, on that one given day, it looked really, really bleak. But as I look back, which is the same thing that people in the Psalms do, as I look back, I said, God helped me rebound. Or I could even say at times when I was not close to God, I helped myself rebound. Or somehow life works out, or you do move beyond it. You never remain unemployed forever. And obviously there's probably somebody that has remained unemployed for a long time. You never are homeless forever. In other words, there's movement, but when you're fearful and when you're in the middle of an acute event, one of the things that's helpful to you is plug yourself into your own bigger story and realize on the horizon there could be something different. And imagine what that is and start to let God draw you there. And use God's stories where God did the same thing, and plug yourself into the bigger story. So to me, I said, plug yourself into stories. And I said, if you can help other people tell their stories, because those stories they're not going to be all sad days. There'll be other sad days, but they'll be, and help them plug in to say, you have a future. Whether they speak God language or not, you have a future, and you may not see it. But if you get them talking, I think sometimes that helps them at least get a glimpse of it.
Yeah, that's, I'm just sitting here sort of with goosebumps because, that's what this podcast is all about. And, when I originally thought of running my next half marathon next weekend for Hurricane Harvey, and then this beautiful relationship that's forming with St. Andrew's Church and you all, I kind of thought at it as sort of a, sidebar or a off tangent from what this podcast is, which is, I have found in my running journey this strength, and a lot of that strength comes from what you just said, that, and I've never been what you would call a classic runner. I'm not fast. I'm not built like a runner, but I've sort of adopted this whole idea of, I'm just not going to be afraid to take the next step. I'm going to keep finding a way to take the next step. And I tell the story, last year I signed up to run my first marathon and 26.2 miles. And at mile 20 of that race, I had no idea how I was going to get the final 6 miles. I had never run more than 19 miles, but I was listening to music. And in that moment, this song came on, The Lion and the Lamb by Big Daddy Weave. And this chorus just kept saying over and over, who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? And that just echoed in me for the next 6 miles. And I just kept finding a way through that bigger story, right? It was no longer about me finishing my marathon. It was about being connected to this idea that nobody's going to stop God, and just clinging to that one step at a time. And so now it's just hitting me that this conversation and you and I are having it absolutely fits in line with this whole message. Even though we're not talking about running, it really is talking about being courageous enough, get rid of that timidity and take that next step. Boy, you all have a big marathon to run down there. I'm seeing that right now, but I'm also talking to a man, and, your church, I think you are just the right people to be running alongside of this Pearland community. I don't know. I'm encouraged, as a Christian and as a man of faith. It's beautiful to hear God's story playing out in you all the way it is. So I'm just thankful for that.
Well, thank you. We're excited. And, we're probably trembling as to, what have we gotten ourselves into? And we realize that in the end, it probably isn't going to quite look like what we thought it'll look like. Because if, in fact, we let God guide us through this and we don't push it through, God's going to surprise us, because God does surprise you, because God doesn't think like I think, or anybody else for that matter.
I've always found his plans work out far better than mine. I screw up a lot of plans trying to do it my way, but surrendering has always worked out better than not doing so. So I appreciate it, Father Jim. I appreciate your time. And so, I'm fired up. Next weekend, I'm going to go to Blacksburg and I'm going to run the Hokie Half Marathon. I'm going to wear a sign on my back that talks about, St. Andrew's Church and running for Texas. I'll be sharing a lot of links and stories. I'm going to, make the first contribution to this relief effort through your church, and just be asking other people to partner with me in that. And hopefully they'll hear the love in your voice. And I promise the other folks I've talked with in your church and got to know, they share that love. And, I hopefully there's some confidence that love's going to go into some beautiful stories for people who need it the most right now. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Well, we will be in touch. And again, one of the beautiful things about this was that I think it's a long-term story, and I look forward to being a part of it. And the best part of that really is getting to know you and your church better through this journey. That to me is a beautiful story in itself.
Well, thank you very much. I am honored and humbled to serve this community. They have given me so much, and my family.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, you have a good day, buddy, and I appreciate it. God bless you, man.
All right. God bless you, too. Thank you. Take care, Keith.
See you, Jim. Well, like I said, it's hard to listen to Father Jim there and not be drawn in by just the magnitude of what it is that they are going to be trying to do there in Pearland, Texas, to heal, to bring relief, to somehow get these folks, like Father Jim said, back to not their old normal, but to a new normal, because like he said, they're never going back to what they knew as their old normal. But, with the help of folks like St. Andrews, hopefully they'll get to a normal where they can get back to living life in a very fulfilling and a very functional way. And, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to partner with St. Andrews on this. And Father Jim truly brings the heart of this story to life. And, he's very quick to give a lot of the credit to his congregation, to the other leadership. And it truly is. It's just a church effort. And that is absolutely what has drawn me into this story. If you are interested, again, in donating and helping support this, like I said, I have been sharing links. I'll share them as part of this podcast. I'll share them in a blog post. You can go to my website, 21047.com, click on the 21047 blog link. There will be a blog that has some pictures about, some pictures of some of the work that St. Andrews has already been doing in the community. There'll be some more information in the form of that story talking about this partnership and what I hope to do. And there'll be a link there as well to where you can go to donate to St. Andrew's Church and support their hurricane relief efforts. If you do donate, when you click on the donate button, it'll allow you to target where you want that money to go. So click in the drop down box, just put hurricane relief. And if you would, in the memo section, put 21047. That way we can get an idea of how much money we generate through this 21047 platform and just give us a little idea of the kind of work we can do together. So again, I will be sharing some stories this week along the way as I prepare for the Hokie Half Marathon. It is still a running journey, and it still is my 9th half marathon. I'm thinking this hurricane relief initiative may help me forget that I still have to run 13.1 miles, but I'm looking forward to it. It's a brand new race. I've never run in Blacksburg, and Virginia Tech, where my wife is a graduate, so that will have a little extra connection there. But I look forward to it. There'll be some of my Megs Miles friends over there running it as well. I look forward to that. Most of all, I really do look forward to using this opportunity to partner with St. Andrew's Church and to bring a little relief to the folks of Texas from Hurricane Harvey. And again, I just ask you all to continue to pray for these people and the relief efforts of St. Andrew's Church. So, all of that, thank you very much for listening in today. I hope you all have great runs this week. If you have races coming up next weekend, tackle them, run them hard. If not, and you're just out there cheering, then get out there and cheer hard. And if you have no interest in running, maybe this podcast was of particular interest to you because it's more human interest than running. But I'm just glad you listened in, whether you're a runner or not. I'm always grateful to have everybody who listens into this show. I hope it does bring you some hope. I hope it does bring light to whatever darkness is going on in your life or in the life of your community. I just hope that it does bring some light to those areas.
Look out